Today is Wednesday, which means a lecture script day. I usually write my lectures on a Wednesday, just because I've got to structure my life. I'm also going to finish this Dialectics blog. Today we're looking at lectures 5 and 6.
In Lecture 5, we're told that life and experience cannot be rationally clarified because experience is actually irrational and this irrationality must be acknowledged in thought. You can't rationalise the irrational, but for some reason people misunderstand dialectical thought and think it can be used to rationalise irrational experience. Dialectic claims to reveal what isn't revealed through rationality, what isn't thought. It rises above the opposition of the rational and the irrational. The antithesis arises from the thesis and is not external to it.
There's a notion that you have a thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis. Humans over time have read Hegel and thought, right, he's basically saying you've got your thesis, you've got your antithesis, and then they synthesize together to create something else. But Adorno wants to make the distinction and say the antithesis is not something external to the thesis that should come in. You have to bear in mind that the antithesis arises from the thesis itself.
Dialectical thinking doesn't rely on classifications to understand the particular, rather it focuses solely on the particular. It sees the matter in question from within, instead of merely struggling to grasp and order it from without. Dialectic tries to reveal more of what we fail to think or comprehend after inadvertently training our minds to think in classifications and slogans.
Basically, don't think in preconceived ideas, don't think in classifications and slogans. For some reason, humans, well, it makes sense. You have the world around you and we try to make sense of it. So we try to put labels on things so that we understand it. And then other people learning that terminology, this influences the way they see the thing. And so eventually people stop thinking for themselves and start just embodying the definitions that other humans have used. And then they use them and then the whole thing is perpetuated. Before you know it, nobody's thinking for themselves. And dialectics is here to say, let's critique that. It's there to try and help you just think for yourself. Again, not saying that you can break free from all these terminologies and preconceived ideas that are around us today, because we're all just human.
We can't magically think outside classifications, but dialectical thought doesn't require us to do this. Rather, we must think out the contradictions of the particulars using logic, but know that it cannot constitute the whole of knowledge.
But that's great, because even though we are just human, we don't have to magically let go of ideology and concepts and all this. Dialectics helps us to use what we already have, these conceptions, preconceived ideas, and from within them, find the antithesis from within this and unpack it and dialectically think about it, and if something is a fixed notion which no longer applies to the thing it's talking about, it will not withstand dialectical thinking. It's kind of like the acid test.
You can't not think in reason and basically establish modes of thought. How can we not? We can only comprehend what we comprehend. This isn't to say that we don't have the ability to comprehend what is not thought, though. Adorno also talks about the labour of the concept being a labour of the subject. Basically, thought, or dialectical thought, is hard work and requires exertion. Ready-made phrases prevent the labour of the concept by the subject and distance the thought from the matter.
Okay, this layer of the concept is awful. When I was first reading this at the time, my head hurt. I looked awful. I don't know if I'd wash. When he says labour, I think the word labour is relevant here. I think you have to physically work at the thing, because the moment you chill out, relax and just accept things and go, it's that. It is that no more, because time has moved on. The point is to just sort of go with the flow, float down that river of change. There's actually a Buddhist thing I read in one of the Buddhist books. It's the same thing. You've got to constantly evolve. Don't assume things are fixed. We are not static. People get too fixed on one thing and then you have things like nostalgia creeping in, depression, regret.
Dialectical thought requires a sole focus on the matter. Also, you can't separate the human experience from thought, and experience is imbued with its own historical context. Thought, experience, rational, irrational, and probably subject and object, bleed into one another. The concepts of being in itself, for itself, and in and for itself reveal how human beings' idea of themselves is not what they are objectively, and this miscomprehension causes the suffering that can only be undone by the labouring of the concept.
Like an insatiable thirst constantly giving rise to feelings of dissatisfaction and frustration. So if you don't accept that you change, you will naturally be dissatisfied. It's an inevitability. So this fixed state of mind where you assume things are fixed and want to hang on to it, that way of thinking is inevitably going to depress you.
Finally, Adorno comes out and says that dialectic is not the mechanical triad of thesis, antithesis, synthesis, because the antithesis must arise from the thesis, and he's suspicious of the term synthesis.
Maybe he's just saying to think of a dialectic simply as thesis, antithesis, synthesis is to reduce it, and we fall into the risk of forgetting what a dialectic is. It's not a mere principle you can just apply to something. You have to let the matter speak to you. And I think he's just mentioning this so that we retain that awareness and don't fall into the trap of just assuming it's a principle, such that we would forget to engage with the matter.
A dialectic can cease to be a dialectic and become a mechanical thought process once it fails to have intimate contact with the object.
This thing about the dialectic becoming a mechanical thought process once it ceases to have intimate connection with the matter or whatever. What I basically mean by this is once you separate your ideology from the matter in question and it becomes a preconceived idea, you're not critiquing the thing, are you? You're just applying a concept to it. And because time has moved on from when that concept came to be, it might not be applicable anymore. And most likely it won't be. And people don't think about that.
From Lecture 6, I have learnt that fixed concepts, notions, whatever, are untrue and not dialectical. The same can be said for established methods. A method for dialectic is not a dialectic and is therefore an untruth. To stop labouring the concept is to distort and falsify it. It's like when Kandinsky said that once an artist thinks they have found their style, they've already lost it. That's what Adorno says on page 50. I like that quote.
Such truth should never be static, it's constantly becoming. If you constantly engage with the matter in question and dialectically critique it or think about it or work with it or work through it or labour the concept of it, you become, because time is moving, we're evolving, we're always moving, we're never static. You can't then apply a fixed static on something, it wouldn't be true anymore.
Dialectical thought falls into a method naturally because it is difficult to observe the dialectical process happening without turning the observed process into a method. It's easier to observe dialectic processes more generally, therefore. It's paradoxical, yes. But not to worry yet, because dialectics resolves even its own reification, not by simply confronting what has been reified, but by using it in a dialectical process to go beyond itself.
It's not like you can just wipe your mind of preconceived ideas. You just got to work with them dialectically, labour the concept so that anything that is a reified concept will just fall apart. It won't withstand dialectical thinking. But we always want to apply something to something. It's true, the other day I encountered something, I can't remember what it was, but I had no frame for, oh yeah, the neighbours were cleaning the chimney. I'd never heard this sound before. And the only thing I could compare it to was when I had my teeth scaled and polished, so I was like, is the roof falling in? Because I haven't heard this sound before. And actually, I felt quite horrified. And then when I went outside to check what the noise was, I saw this feathery thing coming out the chimney. And then I was like, a big massive bird is stuck in the chimney. See, I had no frame of reference to comprehend this. And so when you approach a new concept, you have to work with the matter. I was applying all these preconceived ideas to it. The roof is falling in. Is that a big pheasant coming out the chimney?
In Hegel's philosophy, there are no middle terms, but tensions where extremes touch. The universal is the particular, and the particular the universal. As such, truth and untruth are inseparable, and in a true dialectic, truth is a process, a becoming. The abstract is false to Hegel, as it is something isolated, not in its context. This is why context matters when engaging with the thing or object. If a finite instance of knowledge is posited as absolute, it can become ideology when it is void of its context. I think, therefore, to think dialectically means nothing can be absolute but forever becoming in relation to a context.
Think about the context always. Everything has a context and a time and a place. There's a reason for things to arise. And if you're, say, making art that adheres to something from a different context, not your own, it's pastiche, isn't it? You're just doing what someone else did. How do you express yourself? But it's the same when you comprehend things as well. Comprehend it in the moment. Don't let a preconceived idea influence the way you see things. Think for yourself.
The method of thesis, antithesis, synthesis is absurd. This is a mechanical method and is precisely not what dialectical thought is about. Synthesis is not a melding of opposites, but a negation of the negation. When thinking dialectically, it's important to discipline oneself and be attentive to the matter. If we don't hone in, limit ourselves, we'll just view a multiplicity of random differences, when instead we should be focusing without interference on the matter in question and letting it speak for itself within its context. Concepts in a dialectic play out in relation to each other. None is more important than another. Thought essentially moves and develops in and through contradictions.